This is very interesting, and I'll be interested to see if what the photographer has about this. But again, if we're talking about style, these three pictures fall under a category of style. Now, it's not a style that I'm making up, but I am making up that it fits within that style. But I'm going to suggest why I feel that. So each of these pictures, again, utterly different content. These are Kathleen's pictures, utterly different content, utterly different lighting, not to mention black and white and or color. Let me just make a note to myself because I forgot something about these pictures. So focus on the thing I'm going to try to talk about initially with these is focus on the lighting, not the content or the composition. So in what way do these three pictures as a whole, let's look at them as a whole, have an analogous style in terms of the choice of lighting? So the photographer has presented these three utterly different content, but they have a similarity to them in terms of the lighting aspect, but in utterly different ways of the lighting. Any comments?
Yeah, I think it's Venu here, David. I think it starts from the top as a very light and it gradually becomes dark as we go down.
That's true to a point, not so much with the picture of the plant, but generalize more, much more. What about the quality of the light? What is the
light?
So I'm sorry, I didn't grasp it. One at a time, folks. Go ahead.
It has a very diffused kind of a lighting.
Okay, you're on the right track.
I think they all glow.
Okay, that's also on the right track. Different vocabulary word.
I feel like it's a soft light.
Again, same thing. So you're all correct. So these pictures all have, it's not exactly soft in this one, but I see what you mean, because the picture itself has a hardness to it. Look how sharp and hard it is. But the light is soft, the reflections are soft. And of course, at first I thought this was a greatly manipulated picture, but Kathleen, this is a real picture, right? The real time of day, et cetera, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So the light is bright, but also has an element of softness to it. So and this one, of course, soft, diffused, a glow, whatever wording you want to call it. So these three have a style of what's usually just summarized as they're atmospheric. They have an atmospheric light. Now, what that means is usually talked about is that they're creating an atmosphere of softness. It's usually not talked about as now you'll get debate about this, of course. It's usually not talked about as an atmosphere of hard light or harsh light or bright light, but just a softness. Diffused is another way, and all of you use some of that vocabulary. Okay, so that is in and of itself interesting because the photographer has chosen to present those three pictures. So that is a stylistic element. So if you were going to have an exhibit of somebody's pictures, you would have 10 of these, utterly different content for all we know, but would have this stylistic element of soft light, nevertheless bright, certainly in this one. And you could make a case that this one is the most clever one because it has a softness to it, even though the light is extremely bright in the background. And the content that we see is extremely sharp, even though it's lit by this relatively or even very soft light, not to mention what I described here, which is the diffused shadows and the diffusion of the soft colored light coming through and reflecting. This one is a classic where it is just what we see. This is in Newport. This is how it always looks in Newport at certain times of the day or times of the year. So it's, talk about evocative. This is a picture which shows all of the atmosphere that the light creates. And what is that? What is the atmosphere that the light creates? What are the things we actually see in this picture that are generated by this light?
It's moody.
That's your judgment about it, which of course is correct. But what do you actually see in the way the light is
Reflection?
to give you that impression?
So there is some mist in there.
Yeah, haze or a mist.
Okay, so the weather conditions are in and of themselves are hazy and misty, which creates what?
Lower
Visually.
contrast in the top portion.
In the overall picture, actually, in comparison to what it would be without the
Yeah,
haze.
in comparison, but because of the, let's say, contrastiness of the lower portion, you don't see that effect as much. So
And
it's-
also the distance. See, the distance related, again, this is an element of what's
Yeah.
called aerial perspective. The distance in the background here is analogous to what we saw with, it's not identical, but it's analogous to what we saw with Heidi's picture, where we see kind of a haze in the background. And yet, in spite of the haze, we still have, what do we have? Tremendous what? This far background.
Detail.
Focus.
Detail.
Detail.
Yeah. We pick up an extraordinary amount of detail. Look at the little things here that we can see, the masts and all the rest. You can even see all the little windows. So in spite of the hazy, foggy, misty quality greatly diffusing the light by its very nature, that's what that weather condition will do, which is so typical, right on the sound there, is we see all of these details in the background. Now, and then of course, it's as we get closer and the light is proportionally, it seems to be a little brighter here and the reflections add and all the rest, we see more detail. Look at the detail here of the windows in comparison to the same type of boat with the windows way back here. So we see more detail here, but it's still a soft, diffuse detail. And then of course, these very specific reflections are really lovely. And they duplicate in the extremely calm waters, almost one-to-one, the content of what they're reflecting. So those are just beautiful. So here's the point. I mean, here's the thing to look at of what makes this particular picture special. There's a few other things which we'll get to. But remember from time to time, we've all seen this picture before. To a degree, this falls into that category, this atmospheric, maritime kind of look. But this one is really special. There's a lot of reasons for that. One reason is that very often in this kind of misty light, all this crap in the back disappears. In this one, whether it's because of the light itself only or because the photographer messed with it, which I don't care about, I have no real idea, it really keeps detail here. And it's very, very, again, the term is evocative. It forces you to look at that detail and marvel about it. There is incredible detail there. So the revisiting of these masts way back here is just beautiful. There's no other way to, I mean, talking about a quality judge, a qualitative judgment. They're just beautiful. So that's one piece that is really remarkable about this particular picture. And then again, it's the same thing I mentioned before. There's a gradient between the highly reflected and relatively bright water with all of these reflections, and then the dark, 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 moody kind of falling off. And the photographer chose cleverly not to do, let me see if I can do it right without goofing it up. The photographer chose not to, I can't do it right. So give me a second. Not doing it. What I'm trying to do is make it tentative. I won't do it. I have no idea why. Okay, let me start again. Oh, I know what I did wrong. Okay. I put this on there and I can't, yeah, I think I got rid of it finally. I'm trying to crop it to get rid of the bottom and I can't get the tool to work properly, but you get the idea. It's crucial to have this bottom. That's what I was going to show you. If you crop it like this to eliminate the bottom, what do you lose? Any comment from anybody but the photographer? What would you lose?
A gradient.
You would lose the gradient, but what do you lose then? by not having that gradient? What do you lose visually? What do you lose in terms of the effect?
The contrast.
The depth of, if you will, the depth of the whole photograph, you wouldn't have, you
Yes.
you
Part
wouldn't
of
have the takeoff, if you will, into the harbor. If that makes sense.
Yes, where's Heidi? I don't see you in my little
Oh,
thing
I'm here. I'm
Oh.
around
somewhere.
somewhere.
The whole point of the picture I just finished commenting on is how in the far back, you see tremendous detail in its way, and you see tremendous detail in the front, and then you have tremendous detail in the reflections, and then it all disappears. That in and of itself is clever and causes a flow from top to bottom or bottom to top, and works extremely well. And there's one other crucial piece of this picture, and it has to do with the composition, having nothing to do with the bottom being left on. Any idea of what compositional element gives this a sense of shape and depth in addition to the light and the fall off of the kind of detail we see, which we just went through? Any comment?
Is it the angle, since it's not shot straight on?
You're exactly right. Who said that?
It was
Wendy?
Wendy.
Yeah. So what do you mean? Tell me what you see in the angle that is.
It's, I guess if it was more of a snapshotty type thing, somebody probably would have just gone to the side of the boat and shot straight onto the side of the boat, side of the harbor scene. But by having that line and the angle go to the back, it shows a little bit more composition of, just a different non-traditional view of the world.
Yes,
or of the photo.
it's more than a little more. It's a clever and very effective composition, because you're right. The most typical view we see is the so-called snapshot view, which would be probably from over here somewhere, seeing this as a flat line. Here we see these are largish, and then it gradually disappears into the mist. So not only do you have the detail in the mist we've been talking about, but you have the movement. The boats aren't moving, but you still have in its own way a sense of visual movement from left to right, where it just kind of moves. And notice that you have distortion, which works extremely well. So what's the distortion in this picture? I was going to show it to you, but can anybody comment on what it is? It's very dramatic. The distortion in a certain way, it's very dramatic, and you'll probably agree when I tell you what I'm thinking about. So what's the distortion? Anybody?
The bows are much bigger than the sterns.
You're on the right track, but again, that's too
So-
complicated.
Well,
it
it's
Give a
it's-
give a
it's-
specific example.
perspective.
And what distortions does that cause? Visually, we see them. They're very vivid.
Well, you have this kind of wedge effect of it converges to a point on the right and it opens up as you go to the left or the other way around. It's big. There's a wedge that converges to a point on the right.
So David, is the lens a bit like too wide, like so on the wider side?
It's on the wider side, of course. And here's what this is not the distortion we usually talk about necessarily, but here's the distortion. It's still distorted. You see how big this boat is?
Mhm.
You all see this. My guess is this boat's exactly the same size, but look how little it is. That's distorted. The size relationships are distorted. You see what I was getting at, Sam? You said it. You said in some ways the same thing.
Well, they
But
recede to a point of convergence like railroad tracks.
Well, that's the lines, but the distortion
Oh,
is
I
in
see
the
what you're saying.
the size.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about this element that
Yeah.
I chose to talk
Well,
about.
we know that all the boats are the same size roughly, and but
So how do we know that?
well,
Seriously,
just
because we
because
know that.
that's-
Yeah, but the way it looks in
That's
the
how
picture,
that's how we interpret
if you're-
perspective.
because we're used to looking at pictures.
Yeah.
If we weren't used to looking at pictures, this
Then-
scene is
right.
drastically distorted. So this boat is the same size as this boat, et cetera, but they're utterly different the way they look to us. That's in and of itself interesting too. Though, of course, we're so used to seeing pictures. I've written articles about this. We're good seers, SEERS, which confuses the hell out of people. We're not seers, we're seers. Everybody can see. So this is what we're used to. So this is just a stunning picture. This one is purely atmospheric too. Same underlying thing I was talking about a minute ago. Is the light is very soft. The gradation of tones is beautiful. It has that same kind of blob, beautiful, a different kind of blob, not a negative blob, not a blob that we don't see anything. It has this beautiful out of focus element with color, and then again this is more than a gradient. This isn't a gradient. It's just the color stops, but it's all so out of focus there. And then here's the clever piece, is the juxtaposition of this part of it against the two colors are fabulous. The juxtaposition of color in and of itself. And notice how this is cut off at the bottom. I like that. Why? It brings us right to the purple. So the vertical thing becomes what we see the most. And again, this shifting to the right, you don't, as we all know, sticking stuff in the middle is a rule to be broken if that were ever a rule for anybody. So this has a colorist quality to it. What that is referring to is intense. In some ways, the colors are very saturated. In other ways, they're very soft, but there is definitely a lot of color. And the color goes all the way through here. And somehow, even though we don't even need to know how it was done, and I don't even care if I'm right, but it looks like this color is what this is going to become, but it doesn't matter. It's provocative. It's interesting. And see the glow, the way it's perfectly positioned against the green stuff in the background. Look at even these little leaves, and I don't see the data here, but it doesn't again matter. I can tell this is a nearly wide open lens because this is out of focus and the sharp point is right here. So the point of sharpness works perfectly. So all three of these, Kathleen, are really beautiful. This one is utterly different. It's so sharp. Look at this. We can read all the cars in the back here. My brother, who's also a photographer in LA, has been working with the new Fuji mirrorless camera, which creates a 200 megabyte file. It's vastly overkill. And the pictures he's been sending me have this element, is you could blow them up to 600% and they're still needle sharp, as if that's important, which it isn't. For example, I have pictures that are billboards in LA right now, shot at 3200 ISO with my 2009 top of the line Nikon. So for the right content, you don't have to have this needly quality, but it is beautiful. And the pictures he's been sending me are beautiful. It's a $10,000 camera he's using. And of course, this is a fabulous subject with the curves here. It's very just interesting. And then of course, the way the light is used. And it's exactly we're talking about the right time of day. Now, Kathleen, for all I know, you messed around with this for a while or came back. Is this near where you live or is this somewhere else entirely?
That's in Little Rock, Arkansas. It's not anywhere near where I live.
Yeah.
We were there for a conference, and the lighting was exactly like that. And I actually took that photo out of my hotel window with my expensive Sony. But believe it or not, I mean, it's I use my Zeiss lens, and I couldn't believe the colors that were there at the time. It wasn't that I took it and then discovered the colors. They were like that, which is why I took the photo in the first place.
Yeah. So that falls in the category of seeing something and lucking out. It all fit together at the moment you actually took the picture from the place you took it at, of the content that you saw. So the reason I asked you the obvious thing is it looks like you saw this underlying composition and a potential for the light, and you came back over like 3 months and tried to get this very picture, but you found it at a moment. It's really stunning. All the little detail. So is this the Sony mirrorless camera?
Yes. That actually, I know this, I do have the Sony 7R3 now, but I believe that was with my Sony 99 Mark
Earlier
II.
version. Yeah,
that was the Mark II, and it was with the Zeiss 50 millimeter lens.
Just poking it out the window. Yeah, see, people like me don't keep track of other brands. I use all Nikon, and it's part of my body, my equipment, system that I have. I often try to stay aware of stuff, but I've lost track. Fuji hired me about 5 years ago to trail around the US with the chairman of Fuji using, when I got the job, I told him, I'm going to use Nikons. because it's fast and I know how to use those. They're part of my body. And they went nuts. They said, you got to use Fuji. So they sent me all the high-end Fuji equipment, paid me for 2 weeks to learn how to use it. And those of you that have had experience with mirrorless cameras, there's quite a learning curve, not to mention making it as part of your body. And I hadn't. So when I was in the governor's office in Wisconsin with the chairman of Fuji and the governor, and all of a sudden I could not do something. I didn't know how to do it, whatever it was. So that was really, I was able to fudge it, later in Photoshop, but it was quite an experience. But the point is the mirrorless cameras are magnificent, apart from being quiet, of course. They're sharp like this, even the lower end ones. Their ability to get automatic exposure and the autofocus are light years superior to the DSLRs, but they're still a little slow for the way I work. I take 4,000 pictures a day in industrial settings, sometimes in medical ones, and I need that kind of speed and the bigger buffers. Bottom line is the mirror cameras are just fabulous. And I believe now the one my brother is using for 10 grand is the last and best version. It's not a fast camera. It's not meant, it's more like a view camera. But this picture really bears out the underlying quality. And of course, the corollary to the underlying quality is that it's, a lot of people find this kind of sharpness and detail overkill with any camera. So that's a matter of judgment and taste. So we use equipment which fits the way we see and the way we like our images to be perceived. But I rather like this. I even like the little car right here. You're really lucked out. One little car with headlights is just perfect. All right, let's see where we're at here.